Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I will be ranking Christopher Nolan's filmography from best to worst. So all of the films he has directed, they have been arranged here in chronological order, and I'll be going through and ranking them from S tier through to D tier. There's no E tier or F tier because I don't really think any of Christopher Nolan's films warrant being that low. And just a reminder that this tier list is within the context of his own filmography. So an S tier film doesn't necessarily mean it's an S tier overall, although it definitely is. And say C tier for Christopher Nolan might be B tier overall, right? It doesn't mean it's equivalent to other films, just within his own filmography. So let's get started. First film, Following. Now, Following is a super interesting film because it was made on a absolute micro budget. One of the smallest budget films I have ever seen. It's black and white. It's got a really cool story. Basically, without giving too much away, a guy discovers another guy and starts following him, and it starts to become like a bit of a thing that he does. And a lot of Christopher Nolan's like hallmarks as a director are pretty present here. That kind of desire for a twist and focusing more on themes and character, definitely present here. So I'm going to go C tier for Following. I've actually seen this film twice, and the first time I really enjoyed it. The second time I didn't enjoy it as much. And I think that might be a case of maybe seeing its flaws like a bit more prominently, but it's a super short film, definitely worth your time if you haven't checked it out. It is pretty solid. Next up we have Memento. Now, Memento is one of my favorite movies of all time, starring Guy Pearce. Basically, the premise is this guy can't remember anything, and he has his whole body tattooed with like reminders and stuff, and the film plays out in a very interesting order. It's a difficult film to kind of comprehend when watching it the first time, and I haven't seen it twice. That being said, Memento is an easy first S tier for me. Memento is one of like the most enjoyable movie experiences I think I've ever had. Like, it was such a blast watching it. I loved the characters in this one, the relationship between Guy Pearce's character and the chick, I can't quite remember her name, but she's excellent in the film, and their relationship's super cool. There's some nice elements of comedy. I remember like this one line sticks out where he's like, alright, I'm chasing someone, oh wait, he's chasing me. That segment is super cool, and Christopher Nolan really milks like this concept to perfection, and that's really what he does best. He's good at doing high concept things and executing them in a way that is accessible, and Memento is fantastic. It's just got such a cool vibe, such a cool plot. Easy S tier for me. Next we have Insomnia, starring Robin Williams and Al Pacino. This one's a bit difficult to rate. I'm not the biggest fan of Insomnia, but I do think it is decent. I'm going to go C tier. I'll probably put it below Following, even though I think it's probably the better film. I enjoyed Following more, and I think given the budget constraints, it's probably a more impressive film. But Insomnia, yeah, so Robin Williams playing a villain, which is super cool to see. Basically, Al Pacino plays, I'm pretty sure he's a detective. It's been a while since I've seen this film, but he plays like a detective who's suffering from insomnia, and he's trying to track down a killer in some kind of like remote location. There's some really cool sequences. One in particular that stands out is like in the trees with the fog. Robin Williams is really good as a villain. His performance is excellent. Al Pacino is good, as you would usually expect in these types of films, but overall it doesn't really stack up to the rest of his filmography, in my opinion. I think it's fine, like it's a decent thriller, but I wouldn't really say that people have to check this one out. Like it's just okay. If you're a fan of the genre, it's definitely worth watching, but outside of that, it's probably skippable. Next we have Batman Begins, the first of the Dark Knight trilogy. I'm going to go B tier for Batman Begins. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the superhero movies. DC, Marvel, doesn't really matter to me. I'm not a big fan of them in general. However, Batman Begins is one of the better efforts. We get to explore Christian Bale as Batman and Batman's origin story, and I think Christopher Nolan did a good job. This film is just super solid without really being amazing. Like, the acting is good, the production value is good, the action sequences are good, but nothing really jumps out as being great to me. So that's why I've got it in B tier. It's good, but rather lame, especially compared to the film that comes after it. Next up, we have The Prestige. So, The Prestige is super tricky to rate. We have Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman starring in this one. They play two rival magicians. It's set in like the 1800s, I believe. Can't quite remember. I'm pretty sure it's 1800s. Might be early 1900s. But yeah, this film is awesome. I'm gonna go A tier, and look, it's super close to S tier. The plot twist towards the end is insane. I think this is where Christopher Nolan really started to like make a name for himself with regards to his creativity and with regards to big shock twists. I really like this film as well compared to some of his others, because there is a fair bit of attention being drawn to the characterization. The acting is fantastic. This is one of my favorite Hugh Jackman performances, one of my favorite Christian Bale performances. Scarlett Johansson's also in it, and she's excellent. I love this film so much. I could watch this film over and over and over again. It's very close to S tier, but I'm going to try and show some self-control and not put too many films in the S tier category like I did with my horror tier list. Next, we have The Dark Knight. So like I mentioned earlier, I am not a big fan of superhero movies. That being said, The Dark Knight is Christopher Nolan's best movie, in my opinion. For me, to love this movie is an achievement, because usually when there's like a new superhero movie such as The Batman or The Joker or Logan, a lot of people really like to jump on the hype train and say like, this is one of the best films ever made. Now, The Dark Knight shits on all of them, in my opinion. It is so much better than any other superhero movie. It's in its own category for me. Where do I even begin when trying to like break this down? It takes Batman's character in really interesting places. Christian Bale is fantastic as Bruce Wayne / Batman. We have so many good performances in this movie. I couldn't even begin to list them all, but we'll start with the most obvious one. Heath Ledger as the Joker. Not only the best performance of Joker we have ever seen and will ever see, but arguably the best acting performance of all time, period. He was so damn good, he carried an already excellent movie. And the rest of the ensemble is terrific as well. The movie doesn't really follow like a set structure. It's got so many twists and turns, and it weaves in and out. Like halfway through, the movie changes again. There's multiple antagonists. There's so many different things going on from the opening sequence to the ending. This film is absolutely flawless. One of the best movies ever made. Next up, we have Inception. So Inception, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, is one of those mind-bending sci-fi films that Christopher Nolan kind of follows up The Prestige with. Although The Prestige isn't particularly sci-fi, it's more so just magic focused. Inception is super good. S or A tier though, that's the question. I'm going to put Inception in A tier, and I'm going to put it below The Prestige. I love Inception. I genuinely just don't think I can put it S tier, given that I haven't seen the film in like the last 8 years or so. Like, it's been a long time since I've seen Inception. But yeah, this movie ticks all of the boxes. Like, it has incredible action sequences, a really unique concept that's both easy to follow along with for like an average viewer, while also rewarding your intelligence and not holding your hand too much. Like, Christopher Nolan has been criticized for his exposition, and there's definitely a lot of exposition here, but I don't think it gets in the way of a good film. There are flaws with Inception, but overall I think it delivers. Like, it's an incredibly unique film. There are no other films like Inception, and it's so incredibly memorable. Like, there's so many awesome sequences in this, from the ending that's ambiguous to the famous visual effects scenes where the European city kind of flips on its head. So many awesome actors in this one as well, like another crazy ensemble cast. This was Christopher Nolan at the peak of his powers, in my opinion. And yeah, Inception, easy A tier, and one of the best movies of all time. Next up, we have The Dark Knight Rises. Now we finally are going to get into hot take territory. I'm going to put Dark Knight Rises into D tier. Now, I will preface this and say I have only seen this movie once. And when I watched it, I was not engaged. I was not paying full attention from beginning to end. Now, that was the fault of the film, mind you, because it didn't keep me engaged. But that being said, like, I might end up rewatching this and having a different opinion. But my opinion as it stands right now is this film is incredibly boring. It is way too long. It is outdone by The Dark Knight in absolutely every way. The film is a Batman movie, but Batman is barely in it. And we focus a lot more on Bruce Wayne's character, and for me that's just a whole lot less interesting. At least this version of Bruce Wayne isn't as interesting to me. Bane as a villain and Tom Hardy's performance of him, I'm not the biggest fan of either. The whole Catwoman stuff, didn't really enjoy it. This film just has nothing really going for it compared to The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight just has so many memorable sequences. I can barely remember anything from this movie. I remember Batman breaking his back and a few bits and pieces with action sequences and the ending. That's about it. This movie is a huge disappointment, easily the weakest in the trilogy, and up until this point of time, I think it was Christopher Nolan's worst film. Okay, next up we have Interstellar. So, Interstellar is a bit of a tricky one. It's either S tier or A tier. I've seen this movie like 3 times. It's definitely the movie I've seen the most on this list. And I think for that reason I'm going to go S tier. Now, why is this film S tier ahead of The Prestige and Inception? Because I would kind of put them all on similar levels. Like the gap between S tier and A tier is very minute. I'm just trying to spread it out a little bit. But Interstellar for me is one of Christopher Nolan's best films for the fact that I care about the characters. Now, a lot of people kind of complain about how his characters are a little underdeveloped and he likes to focus on themes a lot more than the characters themselves. I think this is an exception. Matthew McConaughey is so good in this film, and I really truly care about his character. Now, yes, there are some things that are a bit on the nose, and a few people kind of roll their eyes at like the whole meaning of the film being centered around love, but for me, I buy it. I like it. I think the film is super well executed. It's got a really well told story that is built around its characters and the relationships first. And then from that, we get to explore this realistic portrayal of space exploration and what our future might actually look like. And it's just done so incredibly well. Like the visual effects, I don't think I've seen better visual effects in a film than I have in Interstellar. Like they're so good. Right up there with Blade Runner 2049 for me. The score, hands down the best score I think I've ever heard in a movie ever. Like all of these films have good scores. Like Hans Zimmer and Christopher Nolan have a great connection here, but Interstellar is probably my favorite score. Like the orchestra is just absolutely insane. The sequence in the water involving time is incredible. The landing sequence is incredible. There are 3 instances in this film where I cry every single time. Like it's truly beautiful. That scene where Matthew McConaughey watches the videos from his daughter and son, it's really heartbreaking, and his performance is A1, as good as it gets. Probably my favorite Matthew McConaughey performance, and definitely one of my favorite Christopher Nolan films for sure. Next we have Dunkirk, the World War II film. I was super keen for this one because I'm a big fan of World War II movies and war movies in general. Christopher Nolan being at the helm, I was really excited. However, I will say this film was a slight disappointment. I'm gonna go B tier, and look, it's honestly pretty close to C, but I'd probably rate it similar with Batman Begins. It's a solid film, it's well made, but it doesn't quite hit the ultra high highs that some of the other films on this list have. So the first flaw with the film for me is it's exploring a historical event but isn't overly historically accurate. He kind of forgets that the French exist, and look, I'm fine with that. Like he's telling a British story, and that's okay, but it does kind of hinder the film a little bit not to get that perspective. I feel like it was a missed opportunity, and it would have been cool to see like the French holding the front lines on Dunkirk Beach. But for me, what drags this down a bit is the characters. Like none of the characters are overly engaging. We don't really know too much about most of them. Tom Hardy's character is like pretty cool as a pilot, but honestly, I don't really care too much about what happens with him. The exploration of the event itself is good, like it's got nice moments of tension, the score's really good here, but this film just doesn't really stand out quite like some of his others for me, so that's why I've rated it in B tier. And finally, we have Christopher Nolan's most recent film, Tenet. Now, I watched this in cinemas with some friends, and we all kind of had the same opinion, but I think I probably liked it the least out of all of them, and I'm going to go D tier, just above The Dark Knight Rises. So, yeah, Tenet is not good. From the opening sequence, it's just a very confusing film. The gimmick doesn't really work for me. It sounds good in theory, and like watching the trailers and kind of seeing like, okay, we're going to get something kind of similar to Inception. But then seeing these action sequences play out, they're honestly like so incredibly difficult to watch because you're trying to figure out what the fuck is actually happening on your screen that you're not actually enjoying what's unfolding. The characters here are super lame, like the main character is literally called protagonist and they have no character development. The villain is kind of cliche. Robert Pattinson is a positive aspect of the film, but even he is kind of boring and none of the characters really have all that much personality. I don't like the action sequences, as I said, because of the gimmick. And one of the worst aspects of this film was the sound design. I know a lot of people have started to shit on Christopher Nolan's films for the sound design recently, and it was because of this movie. I think his other films definitely had this problem, but Tenet is the worst offender for not being able to hear dialogue and then being blasted out of the cinema with the score or with the action sequences. Like it's so terribly mixed. And yeah, there's just a lot of problems with Tenet, and it doesn't really stack up to the rest of his work. So that's why I've put it in D tier. But yeah, that's it. That's my tier list for Christopher Nolan's films. These films are ranked in order as well, so left being the highest and the far right being the lowest. What are your favorite Christopher Nolan films? Let me know in the comment section below. Do you agree with my hot takes? Do you agree with my S tier films? I'm interested to hear your opinion. As always, thank you for watching. This has been For the Record. I'll see you in the next video.